Hi everyone, it's Lindy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to go over everything that you need to know about buying pallets. And I know you're probably thinking, whoa, hold up. I just started learning about liquidation. I haven't even bought a box lot yet. I can't even think about pallets right now. So I know right now a lot of sellers are out there looking for different sourcing opportunities because with the pandemic, maybe you're not really feeling comfortable going to thrift stores or garage sales anymore. And now I totally understand. Buying pallets is crazy intimidating. And I also know that there's a lot of misconception out there as to who can buy pallets and who's not allowed to buy pallets. And so in this video, I wanted to talk to you all about what you need to know about buying pallets in the event that you decide that you want to graduate from box lots and start buying pallets for your reselling business. So now before I get started, I do also want to make sure to let everybody know that I do not recommend that a brand new seller jump in and start buying pallets, because it's a little bit like learning to run before you can walk. There are many reasons for this. Of course, I will get into all of those, but I do feel the need to say that up front. If you are a brand new seller and you're still just kind of getting your feet wet with what kind of merchandise you want to sell, I do not recommend jumping straight into pallets. Work your way up. But if you're still working your way up, this video is still going to be useful for you because I'm going to go over everything that you need to know about buying pallets when you finally get to that point. And if you're an experienced reseller and you've had fun buying box lots and you're wanting to get a better unit price and you're really curious about what it's like having pallets delivered to your home, this video is for you. So now let's talk about the first reason why I personally prefer buying pallets over box lots, and that is getting a better unit price. Now, typically whenever you buy box lots, you end up paying more per unit because you have fewer items in the box that gets shipped to you. But when you start talking about buying pallets, you usually get a better unit price because you're buying such a large quantity from the supplier. For the most part, in my experience, when I buy pallets over buying box lots, I'm able to save about 25% on my cost of goods just by buying in larger volumes by the pallet. Another reason why I personally prefer buying pallets over box lots is because it's a lot more volume in a shorter time frame. So I discussed a little bit about this in the video that I did breaking down how to make $1,000 in profit every single week from reselling. I'll go ahead and link that video up here if you missed it. But in that video, I talk about the different kind of sales models that you have as a reseller, the long tail versus the quick flip, the high volume versus the low volume, the fast nickel versus the slow dime. I talk about all of that. And most of my items fall somewhere in the middle, but I do consider myself a high volume store. Because I do a lot of liquidation, wholesale, retail kind of items, sometimes my unit price can go up a little bit and my sale prices are a little bit lower, which means that my profit margins they're not super slim, but they're not as big as they would be if I was going to like garage sales or thrift stores and paying a couple of dollars for something and selling it for 50 bucks. You know, I'm usually getting about 1.5 times my money back. So when you're talking about slimmer margins like that, if you want to make more money, you have to sell more. That means you have to perform with volume. And so I'm currently in the season of my business where I am trying to add volume so that I can increase my profit every single month. And so if I was doing that with only box lots, I would be having to buy a lot of box lots. And that also means a lot more capital being invested, because remember, I said typically I can save about 25% per unit just by buying in a pallet instead of boxes. So when you're talking about buying more volume so that you can increase the amount of items in your eBay store, so therefore you can increase your profits every single month, 25% is a lot, right? 25% of your cost of goods, that's $250 on every $1,000 you have tied up in capital. So that's a pretty significant amount. So when I'm working at building and doing volume, saving 25% is super important. So that's another reason why I prefer doing pallets. Another reason why I prefer pallets over box lots is because most of the time when it comes to the entire checkout process and actually purchasing the lot, there's a lot less competition. Something that I've noticed over, the last couple of years of doing liquidation, something I've noticed especially now with the pandemic going on and everyone kind of shifting how they're doing their sourcing, I've noticed that box lots are flying off the shelf or flying off the site, however you want to say it. It's almost like a race to the checkout. When a new liquidation lot is posted, it's almost like people are instantly adding it to their cart and checking out. And that means that people are paying more money. They're probably paying full price. There's no price drops. If there's an auction, that means that lots are getting bidded up higher. And I believe that the primary reason for that is because box lots aren't scary. It's not scary to get a 20-inch by 20-inch by 20-inch box delivered to your house that has merchandise that you can sell. The entire idea of that is actually pretty cool. That's one of the reasons why I started doing liquidation, right? Because it's a box. You get a box of merchandise that costs you a couple $100. It seems like it's low enough risk and it's easy. And when things are easy, lots of people are going to do them. So it's only when you start doing the things that are a little bit more difficult and a little bit more intimidating that you start to have less competition. Now, in the reselling world, there's always going to be competition. I'm not saying that pallets don't have any competition. They absolutely do. But there's not nearly as much as with box lots. And I'm still able to get that better unit price. So even if I end up paying more for a pallet, it's still cheaper per piece than if I go with the box lot. Now let's talk about one of the scariest parts to buying a pallet: freight shipping. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you have realized if you are going to buy an entire pallet, it's not as simple as just having UPS or FedEx drop it off on your doorstep. And it's not nearly as cheap. If you are buying a pallet, you have to have freight delivery. Now, I know this is also something else that concerns people because they think, I don't have a forklift, I don't have a warehouse, how am I supposed to have a pallet delivered to me? Well, I can tell you from experience, I have never had issues with having a box truck deliver pallets to my home. I do live in a residential area. I do not have it delivered at a commercial property. It is perfectly acceptable. As a matter of fact, a lot of companies that sell pallets are well aware that most of the buyers that are coming to them are potentially residential. They are already set up to ask you if you live in a residential area so that they can make sure that you have a truck with a forklift that delivers to you. They are well prepared. No company that I've ever worked with has ever assumed that every time a pallet delivery is going out, it's instantly going to a warehouse with a loading dock and a forklift. Now, that's not to say that you might not have to pay a little bit more for shipping if you live in a residential area, and you do need a truck that has a lift gate as well as a pallet jack on the truck. But for the most part, it's usually something like an extra 30, 50. I have seen an extra $100, but really, it's not that bad. It's kind of like paying for convenience. So what usually happens is you will buy the pallet from a liquidation company. They usually always have a freight company that's already set to take your pallet. And what happens is your pallet, or pallets if you buy more than one, are going to go to a couple of different trucking companies. At least this is how it's always happened for me. So for instance, let's say I bought a pallet from California. California might drive it all the way down to Texas, and then it gets dropped off with a different trucking company. And then Texas will then drive it all the way up to Wichita and then drop it off with another company, and then they will take it up to Salina and they will drop it with another company, and then I will get a phone call to schedule delivery. So I schedule delivery whenever the pallet is within like an hour or two radius of me, because that's when the final trucking company has possession of my pallet. They will actually call me and they will say, I will be in your area on this day around this time. Does that work? If it doesn't work, I can schedule a different day. And then what ends up happening is they show up, they finagle their truck down your street, they get out, they use the little, what's it called? Lift gate? The lift gate. And they already have a pallet jack on the truck. They jack up the pallet, They put it on the lift gate, they bring it down, and then they wheel it into your garage or leave it on your driveway, wherever you want to have them put it. You sign the little piece of paper after you look it over and make sure everything's fine, and then they leave. End of story. Something else to take into consideration is the cost of freight delivery, because just like having a pallet delivered isn't as simple as having FedEx drop it off on your doorstep, it's also not as cheap. If you have a single pallet delivered, I've seen the price range anywhere from $250 to $350 for one single pallet. However, if you're buying multiple pallets, then the price starts to go down depending on how many you're buying. There was one time I bought 4 pallets and the cost was about $600 for freight. So that came out to about $150 a pallet, and that's about as cheap as I've ever been able to get it. And I had to buy 4 pallets to get that per pallet price. Say that 5 times fast. Per pallet price, per pallet price, per pallet price, per pallet. Wow, I'm impressive. There's another P, impressive. Per pallet price, I'm impressive. But if you don't like the price and you don't like the idea of freight, but you still wish that you could buy pallets, I wanted to tell you I just found out that Wholesale Ninjas, the liquidation company that you guys have seen me unbox a lot lately because I really like their products, Wholesale Ninjas actually has a pallet breakdown service, and I wanted to make sure to mention that because I have not seen any other liquidation or wholesale company out there do this. It's pretty amazing. So they will sell merchandise by the pallet, but with this pallet breakdown service for $180, flat shipping fee, they will actually take the items and break them down from a pallet and put them into separate boxes and ship them ground. So not only would you have the convenience of having boxes delivered instead of a giant heavy pallet and not have to schedule freight delivery, but it's only $180 to ship an entire pallet. Remember, I said I was able to get $150 per pallet when I bought 4 pallets. If you're doing a single pallet, it's like $250, $350. So $180 to ship a pallet in multiple smaller boxes, that's really cool. So I'll make sure to put their website down in my video description if you want to go check out what kind of pallets they have to offer. I've been unboxing a lot of stuff on my channel lately from them because I really do like the kind of merchandise that they have. So if you are interested in getting a pallet and you don't like the idea of freight, you don't like the idea of storing an entire pallet worth of merchandise, consider taking a look at what they have, because they have that pallet breakdown service that's kind of a game changer when it comes to people wanting to buy pallets. Now, not every pallet on their site qualifies for the pallet breakdown service because they do have pallets of some stuff that are a little bit bigger and bulkier, and those cannot be put into smaller boxes, but a lot of their pallets do qualify, so go check it out if you're at all interested. Now, if you are getting into buying pallets, know that there's actually 2 different kind of pallets that you can receive. First of all, the idea of a pallet is actually not the pallet in its entirety. The pallet is actually the wooden square that everything sits on, right? That is what a pallet is. So there's actually 2 different ways that you can receive a pallet. You can receive a pallet with a lot of smaller boxes all stacked on top of the pallet and then wrapped up for security during transit. Or you can actually buy a pallet that has a giant box, a single box on it that is referred to as a gaylord. You could have a pallet with a giant gaylord on it that is full of high volume merchandise. So now, of course, you do not get to pick how this pallet is put together. That is done by whichever company you are buying it through. There are a lot of companies that will only do gaylords. That way, whenever you buy a pallet from them, you get it in your possession and it's just a giant, like 4 foot by 4 foot box that just comes, everything is just in this giant box. And then there are some places that will actually just do a bunch of random smaller boxes, put them on the pallet and tape it up. The reason why I'm mentioning this now is because this is definitely a question you can ask if you're inquiring about purchasing a pallet. You can actually call the company that you are wanting to buy from and ask them if the pallet is made up of a bunch of smaller boxes or if everything comes in a gaylord. And the reason why that is important is because it's for your sanity. So I actually did a video where I was sorting, I'll link it right up here in the iCards for you. I did a video where I showed you how I would sort a bunch of merchandise that came in a big Gaylord, and you want to talk about intimidating? That's intimidating. Looking at a giant 4-foot by 4-foot box that's just full of small stuff, it's really intimidating, right? You get this huge quantity of items, like 1,000 items just loosely thrown in this massive box. It's really intimidating. You're like, whoa, where do I start? There's also a lot more opportunity for merchandise to arrive broken if everything is just thrown into a Gaylord, because then that means that the stuff at the bottom could potentially get smashed. So if you have glass, those items can end up damaged if they're at the bottom, if heavier stuff gets put on top, or if you do things like health and beauty like I do, you run the risk of having things leak and get all over everything inside the Gaylord. So knowing if the merchandise is going to arrive in a Gaylord or a series of boxes on top of a pallet is a significant question to ask if you aren't sure. Because just like having everything arrive in a giant Gaylord can be really super intimidating and frustrating, getting a pallet that has a lot of smaller boxes on it is a lot less scary. Because when it arrives, you have a bunch of boxes and you can just work one box at a time. So I've personally done it both ways, and hands down, I would pick smaller boxes every single time. So I don't have a problem sorting a crazy amount of items in one shot, you know, everything piled into a Gaylord. That's not the part that bothers me. The part that bothers me is the damage that having so many items in a giant box can cause. And because the kind of merchandise that I buy is a lot of delicate kind of items, I don't want to have those items become damaged or arrive broken or leak all over the place or just cause me a big headache overall, because that's just wasted money. Because this isn't true for wholesale, but for me, when I buy liquidation, there's really no guarantee. If things arrive damaged, tough. It's broken. It's broken. There's nothing that can be done about it. So if I can minimize damage by buying pallets of smaller boxes versus a giant Gaylord, then that's usually what I tend to do. Something else that you also need to make sure that you do is you factor in the cost of shipping a pallet into your unit price. Because it's really easy to see a pallet that has a unit price that you like and you end up buying it, but then you didn't consider the fact that it was going to cost extra money to have freight delivery. So that ends up making your unit price a lot higher. And this can really make a difference if you're buying a pallet of something like small appliances, because maybe you don't have as high a volume on this pallet, which means if you're spending a few $100s on freight delivery, the price per unit that you're paying just for shipping is a lot higher than if you're buying a pallet that has, say, 2,000 items on it. You know, if you're spending $300 on freight delivery and you only have 30 items on your pallet, you're adding an extra $10 per unit just for the shipping. So if you bought that pallet for, say, $7 a unit, just the act of adding the shipping makes it $17 a unit, which is more than double what you originally thought. So whether or not you're buying a high count load or a low count, or if you're buying a Gaylord, or if you're buying a series of boxes on a pallet, always make sure to factor in the shipping price with whatever you're actually paying for the pallet, because I promise you that that amount of money is going to create a higher unit cost. And then the last thing that I wanted to address is if you have to have any sort of special business license or reseller certificate in order to buy pallets. And the answer to that is no. Nope, you can be an average Joe off the street and you can buy a pallet and have it delivered to your house. You don't need any sort of special licensing. You don't need to have any special certificates. You don't even have to have an LLC. You can just be a sole proprietor and buy pallets as long as the company that you're buying from doesn't require one of those things. So there are some companies out there that will require you to either have a business license or a reseller certificate, and then there are other companies out there that do not. Anybody can go on the site or pick up the phone and call them and place an order. So if you're about ready to graduate from box lots to buying pallets and you've been waiting to pull the trigger just because you think that you need to have some sort of a special business license or a reseller certificate, just check with the company that you're wanting to buy from, and if they don't require it, you're good to go. And the last word of advice that I have is this: try not to go crazy your first time. I'm speaking from experience here. I went a little crazy my first time buying pallets. I actually bought my first pallets in 2018 and they were clothing. That's right, I bought 2 pallets of clothing and I was so overwhelmed. I had so many items, I couldn't believe it. And honestly, it scared me for a while. So try to start slow and get through that first pallet before you go ahead and order another one so that you can make sure that the process went smoothly once. It'll go smoothly again. All right, you guys, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to put them down in the comments below. Have you started buying pallets yet? Let me know down in the comments. Are you interested in buying pallets and you're just waiting to pull the trigger? Let me know why. What reasons are holding you back from buying pallets? If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. That way I know it. Don't forget to check the video description. I will put a bunch of useful information in there. And as always, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and ring the notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you again so much for watching. I'll see you with my next video. Bye-bye.